The town of Silver Creek was known for its silence. A dusty wind swept through the empty streets as the townspeople carried on with their daily routines. But everything changed the moment a lone rider entered. He was old, but his eyes held the weight of 1,000 stories. His name was Clint Eastwood, a man who had seen too much and spoken too little. Dressed in a weathered coat and a hat pulled low over his face, he dismounted his horse outside Mary's Diner, the only place in town where a traveler could find a warm meal. As he walked in, the townsfolk turned their heads, whispering among themselves. Silver Creek was not used to strangers. And yet, Clint didn't seem to care. He walked to the counter, nodding at the old woman behind it. "Coffee," he muttered, placing a coin on the table. Mary, the owner, gave him a wary look, but poured him a cup anyway. Just as he took his first sip, the door slammed open. A young boy, no older than 10, ran in, his face pale with fear. "Help! My sister! She's in trouble!" the boy cried. The entire diner fell silent, but no one moved. People lowered their heads, pretending not to hear. Trouble in Silver Creek wasn't something folks got involved in, except for one man. Clint placed his cup down, adjusted his hat, and turned toward the boy. His voice was low but firm. "Where?" The boy's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly pointed down the street toward the edge of town. Without another word, Clint Eastwood stood up, his boots echoing against the wooden floor as he walked toward the door. He didn't know what kind of trouble the girl was in, but one thing was certain. Kindness wasn't just about words. It was about action. Clint stepped out of the diner, his sharp eyes following the direction the boy had pointed. Down the dirt road, past the fading buildings, he could see a small group of men gathered near the old barn at the edge of town. The boy, still catching his breath, ran beside him. "Please, mister. My sister, Anna, those men took her. They said my pa owed them money, but he died last winter. They won't let her go." Clint didn't say a word, but his jaw tightened. He'd seen this kind of thing before. Men taking what they wanted just because no one was strong enough to stop them. As they neared the barn, one of the men, a tall, greasy-looking brute, turned and sneered. "Look at this, boys. The little brat went and found himself a hero." The other men chuckled, but Clint didn't react. "Let the girl go," Clint said, his voice calm but commanding. The tall man crossed his arms. "Or what? You an old lawman? A bounty hunter?" Clint shook his head. "Nope." "Then you should turn around and walk away, old man." But Clint didn't move. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't raise his fists. He just stood there, silent, his presence alone enough to unsettle them. After a few tense seconds, Clint took a slow step forward. "You got a choice. You let the girl go and you walk away. Or—" He didn't finish his sentence. He didn't need to. The leader scoffed, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He glanced at his men, then at Clint. Something about this stranger, the way he stood, the way he spoke, made them uneasy. Finally, he spat on the ground. "Fine. Take her. Ain't worth the trouble." A moment later, a frightened girl, no older than 15, was pushed forward. She ran straight to her little brother, hugging him tightly. Clint gave the men one last look before turning away. No violence, no threats, just quiet, unshakable resolve. As he walked back toward town, the boy ran after him. "Thank you, mister. You didn't have to help us." Clint glanced down, tipping his hat slightly. "Didn't I?" Because kindness wasn't about what you had to do. It was about what was right. Clint walked back toward town, the weight of his actions settling in. The young girl, Anna, clung to her little brother, still shaken but safe. The townspeople, who had watched from behind their curtains, now stepped outside, whispering among themselves. Mary, the diner owner, stood by the porch, arms crossed. "You just made enemies, stranger," she warned. "Those men ain't going to forget this." Clint simply nodded, unbothered. "I've had worse." He turned to Anna and her brother. "Where's your home?" The boy pointed toward a rundown shack near the outskirts of town. "It's just us now. Pa's gone, and Ma passed years ago." Clint sighed. He had seen too many kids left to fend for themselves. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few silver coins, placing them in the boy's hands. "Get yourselves food, and don't let anyone push you around." The boy's eyes widened. "But why are you helping us?" Clint looked down at him, his weathered face unreadable. "Because someone once did the same for me." But just as he turned to leave, a sudden noise shattered the moment. Bang! A single gunshot echoed through the quiet town. Clint froze. His years of instinct kicked in as he turned sharply. Down the street, stepping out from the shadows of an alley, was the leader of the gang, the same man who had let Anna go. Except now, he wasn't alone. His men were back, and this time they had their guns drawn. The leader smirked, spinning his revolver around his finger. "You didn't think we'd let you walk away, did you?" The townsfolk quickly scattered, slamming their doors shut. Clint remained still, his eyes locking onto the men in front of him. He knew how this would end. The leader chuckled darkly. "You think kindness makes you a hero? No, old man. In a place like this, kindness makes you weak." Clint didn't answer. He just lowered his hand slowly toward his belt. The air grew heavy. The wind stopped. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, with the speed of a rattlesnake, Clint Eastwood moved. The moment Clint moved, time seemed to snap back into motion. His hand shot to his hip, and in one swift motion, bang! The leader's smirk disappeared as his gun flew from his hand, a bullet tearing through his wrist. He staggered back, screaming in pain. The other men barely had time to react before, bang! Bang! 2 more shots rang out. Clint's aim was precise. One man dropped his gun, his shoulder bleeding. The other fell to his knees, clutching his leg where the bullet had grazed him. The fight was over before it even began. Clint stood tall, smoke rising from his revolver. His eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the fallen men. "Didn't I warn you?" His voice was steady, calm, as if this was just another day for him. The leader, now on the ground, glared up at Clint with hatred. "You think you've won?" he spat. "This town is rotten. People here don't care about kindness. You're just an old fool wasting his time." Clint looked around. Doors creaked open, eyes peered out from windows. The townsfolk, who had once stayed silent, were now watching, really watching. Then the unexpected happened. Mary, the diner owner, stepped forward. She walked up to the wounded men, her face hard with years of disappointment. "Not anymore." Then another man stepped out, a blacksmith, arms crossed. "We've been scared too long." And another, and another. One by one, the people of Silver Creek came forward. They weren't afraid anymore. The leader's face twisted in anger. He had lost, not just to Clint, but to the very people he had bullied for years. Clint exhaled, holstering his gun. "Kindness ain't weakness," he muttered. "It's what gives a man real strength." He turned, tipping his hat to the children one last time. Then, without another word, he walked back to his horse. As he rode away, the boy called out, "Will we see you again, mister?" Clint glanced back, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "If you ever need me." And with that, he disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a town that had just learned. Kindness isn't about being weak. It's about standing up when no one else will.